Hey, how are you guys? Glad you could join me. We are here for our next few chapters of Roald Dahl's The Twits. Now remember, you need to pay close attention because at the end you're going to have some questions to answer and some activities to do. So make sure you pay close attention as we read the story. If you don't know the answer, go back and re-listen. It's just how we do it when we read. There's also a bunch of other books out there by Roald Dahl. If you are looking for something to read this summer or this fall, whatever, look up Roald Dahl. There's James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You've heard of those. BFG. All kinds of books that you can read written by the same author. A lot like our David Walliams books. Let's get started. 4 sticky little boys. On one Tuesday evening, after Mr. Twit had been up the ladder and smeared the tree with Hug Tight, 4 little boys crept into the garden to look at the monkeys. They didn't care about the thistles and stinging nettles, not when there were monkeys to look at. After a while, they got tired of looking at the monkeys, so they explored further into the garden and found the ladder leaning against the big, dead tree. They decided to climb up just for fun. There's nothing wrong with that. The next morning, when Mr. Twit went out to collect the birds, he found 4 miserable little boys sitting in the tree, stuck as tight as they could be by the seats of their pants to the branches. There were no birds because the presence of the boys had scared them away. Mr. Twit was furious. "As there are no birds for my bird pie tonight," he shouted, "then it'll have to be boys instead." He started to climb the ladder. "Boy pie might be better than bird pie," he went on, grinning horribly. "More meat, and not so many tiny little bones." The boys were terrified. "He's going to boil us," cried one of them. "He'll stew us alive," wailed the second one. "He'll cook us with carrots," cried the third. But the fourth little boy, who had more sense than the others, whispered, "Listen, I've got an idea. We're only stuck by the seat of our pants. So quick, unbutton your pants and slip out of them and fall to the ground." Mr. Twit had reached the top of the ladder and was just about to make a grab for the nearest boy when all of us suddenly tumbled out of the tree and ran for home with their naked bottoms winking at the sun. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. The Great Upside Down Circus. Monkey Circus. Now, for the monkeys, the 4 monkeys in the cage in the garden were all one family. They were Mugglewump and his wife and their 2 small children. But what on earth were Mr. and Mrs. Twit doing with monkeys in their garden? Well, in the old days, they had both worked in the circus as monkey trainers. They used to teach the monkeys to do tricks and to dress up in human clothes and to smoke pipes and all the rest of that nonsense. Today, although they were retired, Mr. Twit still wanted to train monkeys. It was his dream that one day he would own the first great upside-down monkey circus in the world. That meant that the monkeys had to do everything upside down. They had to dance upside down on their hands with their feet in the air. They had to play football upside down. They had to balance one on top of the other upside down, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest baby monkey at the very top. They even had to eat and drink upside down. And that is not an easy thing to do because the food and water has to go up your throat instead of down it. In fact, it is almost impossible. But the monkeys simply had to do it. Otherwise, they got nothing. All this sounds pretty silly to you and me. It sounded pretty silly to the monkeys, too. They absolutely hated having to do this upside-down nonsense day after day. It made them giddy standing on their heads for hours on end. Sometimes the 2 small monkey children would faint with so much blood going to their heads, but Mr. Twit didn't care about that. He kept them practicing for 6 hours every day, and if they didn't do as they were told, Mr. Twit would soon come running with her beastly stick. The roly-poly bird to the rescue. Mugglewump and his family longed to escape from the cage in Mr. Twit's garden and go back to the African jungle where they came from. They hated Mr. and Mrs. Twit for making their lives so miserable. They also hated them for what they did to the birds every Tuesday and Wednesday. "Fly away, birds," they used to shout, jumping about in in the cage and waving their arms. "Don't sit on that big dead tree. It's just been smeared all over with sticky glue. Go and sit somewhere else." But these were English birds, and they couldn't understand weird African language the monkey spoke. So they took no notice and went on using the big dead tree and getting caught for Mr. and Mrs. Twit's bird pie. Then one day, a truly magnificent bird flew down from the sky and landed on the monkey cage. "Good heavens!" cried all the monkeys together. "It's the roly-poly bird! What on earth are you doing over here in England, roly-poly bird?" Like the monkeys, the roly-poly bird came from Africa, and he spoke the same language as they did. "I've come for holiday," said the roly-poly bird. "I like to travel." He fluffed his marvelous colored feathers and looked down rather grandly at the monkeys. "For most people," he went on, "flying away on holiday is very expensive, but I can fly anywhere in the world for nothing." "Do you know how to talk to these English birds?" Mugglewump asked him. "Of course I do," said the roly-poly bird. "It's no good going to a country and not knowing the language." "Then we must hurry," said Mugglewump. "Today is Tuesday. Oh, and over there you can already see the revolting Mr. Twit up the ladder, painting sticky glue on all the branches of the big dead tree. This evening, when the birds come to roost, you must warn them not to perch on that tree, or they will be murdered into bird pie." That evening, the roly-poly bird flew around and around the big dead tree, singing, "There's sticky stick stuff all over that tree. If you land on the branches, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in a hot bird pie." No bird pie for Mr. Twit. The next morning, Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket to snatch all the birds from the big dead tree. There wasn't a single one on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird was there as well, and Mugglewump and his family were inside the cage, and a whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. Still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favorite meal, so that very same day he went after the birds again. This time, he smeared all the top bars of the monkey cage with sticky glue, as well as the branches of the big dead tree. "Now I'll get you," he said, "whichever one you sit on." The monkeys crouched inside the cage watching all this, and later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping in for an evening chat, they shouted, "Don't land on our cage, roly-poly bird! It's covered in sticky glue! So is the tree!" And that evening, as the sun went down, and all the birds came in again to roost, the roly-poly bird flew around and round the monkey cage in the big dead tree, singing out his warning, "There's sticky stuff on the cage and on the tree. If you fly on either, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in a hot bird pie." Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. "I'll wipe that silly laugh off your bakes," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy, feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in the pot for bird pie before the day is out." How are you going to do that?" asked Miss Twit, who had come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit got very excited. "I have a great idea," he cried. He didn't bother to keep his voice down because he didn't think the monkeys could understand. "We'll both go into town right away and we'll buy a gun each," he shouted. "How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Miss Twit, grinning and showing her long, yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns and spray that filthy bullets or more with each bang."
Exactly,
said Mr. Twit.
lock up the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away.
Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage.
Attention,
he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice.
Upside down, all of you, and jump on it. One on top of the other. Quick! Get on with it, or you'll feel Miss Twit stick across your backsides.
Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest child at the very top.
Now stay there till we come back,
Mr. Twit ordered.
Don't you dare to move, and don't overbalance. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you all in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?
With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Miss Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. And that, my friends, is the end of our chapters for today. Now, remember, you're going to be restating the question, using complete sentences, and answering the questions. It's not that hard for you to do. You've been doing it all the time. It's just how you speak. We don't speak in 1 or 2 words. We usually speak in sentences. So make sure you use them. Have a great rest of your day, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.